everybody. It's a Monday afternoon, so you know what time that is. It's time for your weekly episode of SCV CHAT. Before we get started, please remember, the views and opinions expressed on this broadcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the SCV, its GEC, nor any division, brigade, camps, or any other subsidiaries. With that, we do have a legend of chat on the board for tonight, so we're going to let Carl take it over, introduce tonight's special guest, and we'll get on with a sure fire of an episode.
Hey, glad to be here. I appreciate y'all asking me to do this. I don't know what in the world gave y'all the idea to let me host the show, but it is what it is, so I was happy to do it. And as soon as I was asked, I said, I know exactly who I want on as my guest. Two of my real good friends, Killough and Mutt Cooper. I'm going to give y'all a little background on these two guys. Mutt, and I actually met Mutt through Rock. And I knew Rock for about 30 years before he knew who I was. That's because when I was a young boy, I used to go buy music. My dad taught me to save change up in a tube sock. And when I had enough change saved up my tube sock, I tied around the handlebars of my bicycle and ride down to the record store and buy records. And I'd get home and put the record on and listen to it while I read all the liner notes on the back of the album. And the very first two albums I ever bought, I was about 12 years old, maybe 11 or 12 years old. The very first two I ever bought, guess who was playing on them? Killough. It was Whiskey Bent and Hellbound by Hank Williams Jr. and Habits Old and New by Hank Williams Jr. And if you look at this picture, I think y'all know who that guy on the right is with the long ponytail. That's Willie Nelson. Next to him, Rock, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe is Don Gann. And then you have Hank Cochran, another legendary songwriter who probably every country artist from the 60s to the 90s recorded at least one song he wrote. And then next to him is our guest tonight, Killough. This is from Austin City Limits, I believe in 1981. And it was a Songwriters episode. You can take that back down, Moose, if you want. So anyway, I've been a fan of Rock's for all the years I've almost most of my life, and I just stumbled across him on Facebook a few years ago, and then becoming friends with him, I met my buddy Mutt Cooper, and Mutt is also a songwriter. Some of y'all have heard his music as well. He's written a song called Confederate Soldier that was it was a song about our monuments that have been coming down, and I was extremely impressed with that song because it was so positive in favor of the monuments and not strictly just, you didn't hear anger alone that they were coming down. It was more of a reverent type of approach to the subject, and I really appreciated that about the song. Mutt's got several other songs out there. Both of these guys are top-notch guitar players. I got to sit and play with Mutt. He played at the Alabama Division reunion in Prattville the night after he played at the Georgia Division reunion in Macon, Georgia this year. And when he played in our division in Prattville, we got back to the hotel. I said, hey, we ain't done. We got to sit down. We sat down in the lobby probably about 2:30 in the morning and pick some more. And they didn't put us in jail or anything. It was amazing. So I can't say enough about how happy I am that these two guys agreed to come on. I think y'all are all going to enjoy listening to them. They're just great guys. Very proud to be Southern. Very proud to be American. And I'm proud to have them on with us tonight. Anything, Mutt?
Wait a minute.
Yes, sir.
Are you saying all this about Mutt?
He cut out on me. I didn't hear the whole statement.
He asked, was you saying all this stuff about me?
Are you saying?
I'm talking about both of you. I'm introducing both of you. I didn't tell y'all. I don't think who all rock is written and recorded with, but in addition to Hank Jr., I mean, he had several songs recorded by the Oak Ridge Boys, Sammy Kershaw, Johnny Rodriguez, Brenda Lee, Jeannie Seeley. He had a #1 hit on the soul charts, and I don't think he even knew that until it had hit #1. Is that right? Am I telling them right?
Latimer. Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask y'all.
Made me all of nothing.
You did what now?
Huh?
I didn't catch that.
I said it made me all of nothing.
It made nothing. Well, it made you a #1. How many other country writers have had #1 on the soul chart?
And they say you can make a lot of money songwriting.
Well, someone did.
Yeah.
Any of y'all that have heard? I have to tell. We got some young people out there that watch the chat that aren't familiar with some of the music back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, back when they were still making good music. But if you pick up the album, in my generation, everybody knew when I said, "Hey, Outlaw Women's on the radio." Everybody knew what I was talking about. That was Hank Jr. Well, that's Rock Killough playing the harmonica on that song. So there's a ton of albums from that era that this guy either wrote songs on them or played on him himself. So I mean, we really, I'm very proud to have you on tonight, Rock. It's a highlight of all the. I can go ahead and tell you, I've been on the chat about 6 times or so now, 5, 6 times. This is already my favorite episode. We ain't even filmed it yet, so. That being said,
Well, thank you for the kind words, Carl.
Thank
you for the kind words.
That being said, Rock, I know you grew up, I believe, in Greenville. Is that right? Butler County, Alabama. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
And your music,
yes.
And Mutt and I have talked about this several times. When I listen to your music, there is such a blend of different styles in it, and to me, who were some of your influences when you were learning to play and really, getting into playing music?
I got a guitar when I was 8 years old. The first song I can ever remember learning to play at was Wildwood Flower. When I first heard Chet Atkins, who was at that time a member of the Grand Ole Opry Band, play a solo act, he was so good and so different at the time. They gave him a cameo. He could sit out on stage and play by himself. I heard him play Sweet Georgia Brown one night on the Grand Ole Opry. And from that moment on, all I ever wanted to do was be Chet Atkins, as far as a guitar player went. As far as my literary, or whatever you want to call it, my expression of the heart, I came from the same dirt as Hank Williams. And although I never have been and never will be as prolific as he, some of the things I've touched on are truly heartfelt as his were. And I fashioned myself, if you will, as having come from the same dirt as Hank Williams. That was my earliest influence of all. And then I grew up on a big farm with a lot of black kids, and there was a lot of blues around where I grew up. So that's where my deal is.
What about you, Mutt? Who were the guys that influenced you because you're like Rock. You're not only very good with putting the literary, the words and everything out there, but you've got both of y'all got a style of play that I can't do. I can't play like y'all. I can't. I've never found a thumb pick for number one that fit my big old fat fingers. But who were some of your influences?
Well, you're looking at one of them.
I knew the answer to that.
Yeah. You're looking at one. I was. He's the only hero that I had access to. But I grew up. My daddy was a huge Chet Atkins, Merle Travis, Dot Watson, any kind of finger picking, Jackie Phelps, Dwayne Eddy, all them guys, anybody that, finger pick, my daddy was a fan of. And so a lot of the stuff, now I grew up in church with gospel music. I grew up going to an old black church down in Tuskegee, Alabama. And that's just if you will, a different kind of worship and praise kind of songs you get than you do with regular church, I guess you call it. So that was a huge influence. But as far as the thumb picking and stuff like that, getting to hang out with Rock growing up and learning all the stuff that he did, getting exposed to people like Ry Cooder and Little Feat and good, just really good music, Marty Stewart. I mean, a list of thumb pickers and goes on forever. But all those people, Mississippi John Hurt, all those folks were influences on that. I love blues, gospel, and country. I like country and western, but I'm a real big fan of and bluegrass music. So it's a kind of a menagerie of that influence.
And you're actually originally from Alabama as well. You grew up in Alabama also, is that right?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay.
And people, only thing I can say about that, like Rock said, being from the same dirt as Hank Williams, people from the South, if you ain't from the South, you don't get it. And I'm sorry if you ain't from the South and you're listening, but if you ain't from the South, you don't get it. We come from the same dirt. You can feel it. It comes up through your feet growing up barefooted. And I played barefooted most of the time, but you can
still do.
Yes. But you can just feel that energy, coming up into your body. And it's just it's hard to put into words, but it's a feeling.
I know when I was young, I can remember.
Amen.
I can remember as a young child, when I was growing up, my mom said I would sing myself to sleep at night. Before I could talk, I was humming music, and I think a lot of that was because I had a father that sang and played the guitar. I had a mom that sang. I had a couple of uncles that were pickers. My dad had several friends that were musicians as well. And when the two of them were married and I was young, up till I was about 9 or 10 years old, it seemed like every Friday and Saturday night, either everybody was over at our house or we were over at somebody else's house. And the central theme was, when are they going to break the guitars out and play music? Was it the same way for y'all? I mean, did y'all have a lot of kinfolk and all around you that were playing? What about you, Rock?
But
you go ahead, Rock.
Nobody in my family played but my sister. I came along and I kind of took up that portion of it, but we were singers. My mother and father were excellent singers, and I started singing with them, and we had a trio. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I got to where I was singing soprano, and she sang alto and he sang tenor. And so we sang down at Damascus Church every Sunday of the earth, and at the Conservation Club and places like that, old time gospel music. But that's where I come up, learning how to sing parts. And it's one of my most favorite things to do to this day is sing harmony. I'd much rather sing harmony or back up than be out front. Much rather.
You do great at both.
Outside of that,
I had never heard you actually sing until a few years ago, I guess. As far as out front, but you know, your voice, even as a lead vocalist, to me is just. I mean, I don't know how you go through so many ranges and registers. I can't do that. And I'm impressed by that.
Carl,
You did some background vocals. I know.
Carl,
correct me if I'm wrong, but you and another one of my favorites of all time was Sonny Throckmorton, who I know is a good friend of yours, and I think y'all did a lot of the backup vocals on Habits Old and New for Hank Jr., did you not?
I did backup vocals on Hank Jr.'s. That I worked with him on 2 albums.
2 albums.
Me and Throckmorton did a lot of backup vocals on some of Hag stuff, and a lot of the vocals we did. I tell you how it works. When Throckmorton was hot, he was really, really hot for about 5 years in there. Every Monday morning at Tree Publishing Company was Throckmorton's time in the studio. We started about 9 o'clock when everybody was coffeeed up, and we'd go until he was through. And he'd normally bring in 2 or 3 songs every week. And we sang, him and me and Cliff Cochran, and sometimes other people, but mostly me and him and Cliff, sang backup harmonies on all of his demos. And by Friday afternoon, 2 of them would be cut, and they'd use the exact same demo tracks that we put down. That's the problem about doing what they call master demos. It gives the producer of the record, you don't have nothing to do. He just copies the tracks. But that's the way we got around. And I did a lot more background singing than Throckmorton did. I had to make a living. He was rich as a songwriter,
Yeah.
He wasn't worried about that.
Well, I know that was the only album I could ever recall him singing background vocals on, but I knew you had done that on several of them. I remember Sonny's music predominantly from, I know he wrote some songs for Haggard. One of my all-time favorite songs was The Way I Am, and he wrote that. And I mean, I love that song. I'll tell you one of the reasons I love it. This is another thing I think about Southern music is, so much of it is based on our experiences as people, and it reminds us of a time or a place or a person in our lives. And that was kind of the way that song of Sonny's was with me. It reminds me of my best friend's father, who was like a second father to me. So I have to smile every time I hear that song, And there's a lot of them like that. And Rock, I've noticed, and I want to get into this a little bit later, but I've noticed the same about your music and Mutt as well, both of y'all, that so much of what the two of y'all write, and I used to write. I always want to be a songwriter. That's why I like songwriters so much as I do the actual performer, sometimes more. But it just seems like that the really good songs, you can tell the person who wrote it, there's a personal experience in there somewhere, even if the song that they're writing is not entirely true. It may be fictitious, but there's a hint of their own life experiences in it. And I noticed that in both of y'all's music, especially one I'd like for Mutt to talk about. And that's a song about his uncle, which was called Tom, I believe, the Vietnam.
He was my cousin.
Cousin, okay.
Now, that is a good song.
You want me to talk about it now?
Tell us how you came up with that. I mean, I know you and I have talked, and you're like me, Mutt. It seems like sometimes you'll get an idea and dwell on it for 2 years before you actually sit down and it hits you and you sit down and write it. Was that how that song came about?
Well, it was it kind of came up. Rock was a huge influence on me, my picking and singing and stuff like that. When you can sit right in front of when you can sit and watch the person make all that music come out of that guitar like that, is fascinating, especially somebody young that's trying to soak all that up. But the other person that was a big influence on me was my cousin Tom. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was from Lochapoka, Alabama, so he's a country boy too. And that Lochapoka is right down below Auburn, just a few miles, not too far. And but Tom and I had in common. He rode Harleys, and when he came back from Vietnam in '71, I think it was, he had a '71 D28 Martin, and I have one.
All right, come on.
And Tom actually did some work up in Nashville, doing some lead picking and singing, kind of like that Dot Watson style. So he would spend, and I didn't realize at the time, I'm an occupational therapist now at Martin Army Hospital, and I work with veterans and active duty, but I didn't realize at the time he would sit there all day with me playing music, playing guitar. And I didn't realize it was probably therapeutic for him, but he would spend hours with me. So I really, really learned how to play like he did. And the song came about when he actually was in the VA system and stuff like that, and he had a hard time. That song, you can peel and stick to about 75% of your Vietnam veterans. The only time it mentions Tom is actually in the title of the song. And when I wrote the song, he passed away, and I went to see him right before he passed away, and came home and started the song. And to be honest with you, when I first started writing it, a couple of the lines in there were what I call fluff lines, or just things I thought people wanted to hear about him being a truck driver and playing in Nashville and all that other stuff. And I finally threw all that stuff out and just put the facts out there that he was a veteran. He did have his own demons and stuff like that. And it's just pretty straightforward from there.
Well, it goes, when you listen to the song, from the first line or two, you can tell where it's going. And I mean, it's as the son of a Vietnam vet, you don't want it to go there, but you know where it's going.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it personal to so many people. I mean, for every Vietnam vet, you got those that came home, you've got 2 or 3, 4 offspring. And so you've got this whole new generation that, to me, it kind of puts into perspective, what those men were going through. And I think that leads me to another point, which is
real quick, if I can interject right
Sure.
there, is all of us, especially, I'm not saying people up north didn't serve in the wars, because they did, but I'm saying especially down here in the South, most of all of us, we come, our third great granddaddies fought in the Civil War. My granddaddy was born in 1907. Most people go, well, you were born in 65, but I grew up with older people. I was a late comer to my mom and daddy, but my granddaddy and his brothers were all in World War II. My daddy was in during the Korean War. My brother was just missed Vietnam War, but Tom was there and a bunch of cousins were. And then at the same time, I'm a Desert Storm veteran. So I grew up with Southern, just traditional Southern patriotic people. So it was easy for me to understand, kind of, sort of, just from talking with Tom and stuff like I did, where he was coming from.
Yeah. And what I was getting at was, I mean, and you actually accentuated the point I was going to make, was, to me, and I think Rock will, I'd love Rock to expound on this, but I think that a hallmark of I don't want to say country music, because it's not just country music, but Southern music in general, is that it paints a picture of real life. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier, when you can listen to a good song and you know that there's at least an element of personal experience by the writer in that song, at least an element of it. But it paints a picture. It's believable. A good song to me is something that I can listen to it and I can believe it, and it's something that hits home. Does country music still do that today? I think that's one of the key elements that it's missing in the stuff that's come out in the last 10 or 15 years or so. I mean, what do you think about that, Rock?
You have to ask somebody younger than me.
You haven't heard any of it, have you?
It's usually like,
no, and I ain't intending to hear it either. I do hear every now and then. I just heard one today at lunch. Kenny Chesney put out, and there's several songs that the artists are putting out. It's not all the hat guys and those people. The young people got to have that one. I got out of the car. I'm at the point in time when I have to struggle to get in and out of a damn car, So I was getting out of the car today, and Bertie was standing there patiently waiting on me, and I went, "What was that? You could do what I was saying, getting out of the car? Purple people leader."
I don't remember.
I started singing the Purple People Leader, and I looked up at her and I said, "They fuss about the kids' lyrics. The kids' lyrics love today."
No.
So,
yeah, there
I
were
have
some
anything to
silly
say
ones
about
even
that.
back
Kids gonna
then.
be kids. Kids gonna be kids, and it don't necessarily agree with everything I do, but I still love lyrical songs. And if it ain't got the truth in it, I ain't got no use for it.
Mutt, what do you say?
All I can say is I learned my songwriting craft from that man sitting right there. I have to agree, second that emotion, because I'm gonna tell you what. I mean, you could walk out in my yard and write a country song today, as long as you got that snap beat. Because I got a truck, I got a dog, I got chickens, I got a hog. I got a Harley hog and a four-legged hog, whichever way you want to go with it. It don't matter. And that kind of stuff just drives me up the wall,
Well, especially when it's in every song. It's almost like they're saying, we're not recording real country music, so let's write some music that sounds country. Hey, there's Tater up on the screen.
There's Tater, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour.
But to me, I think that what I would say is that, going back to, I think what we talked about earlier is
going back to what you just said, Carl. How many female country singers' daddy was a coal miner?
Right.
So you don't know. Dolly Parton didn't come out all flash and glitter. Patsy Cline's from West Virginia. They came down out of them hills, the Carter family. They sang about what they lived, and it was real. And the people, a lot of you people that have more than enough money today to produce a record or to get into the music business, if you will, if you got all that money, how you going to sing about a hard time if you ain't never had one?
Right. And that's exactly where I was going with what I was saying is how much of bad music today. And there's a lot of, I don't want to say it's all bad. There's some that, I can listen to it. There's some that's actually really good, but in general, when you turn on, and a lot of it ain't on country radio, they won't play it. There you go.
I was about to say, I think you can hear, I think there's some good country music out there today. You just won't hear it on mainstream radio.
That's it. But on what you hear on mainstream radio, it's exactly what you just said. It's I listen to it and I'm thinking it's all about the beat, and it's not about the life experiences anymore. I mean, because you got writers that probably are, you know, their focus is putting some catchy lyrics together, but there's no depth to it. They didn't have any life experiences, and it's so, you know, the way we make it country is we'll put whatever beat, whatever instruments we want on it, put the snap track in there, and as long as you mention tractors, trucks, and beer, well, it's automatically a country song.
Oh yeah.
And at the same time, you know, you reverse that and you go back to the early and mid 80s, and you had some songs that at the time were kind of what we would well, even back to Patsy Cline. I mean, you had some stuff that were, you know, that we would consider crossover or pop crossover country, and it had a more of a softened, less twangy, you know, country tone or instrumentation to it, but the lyrics were still very good. I mean, it was still good music. And I like what Waylon Jennings said one time, you know. He said, you know, I can record a pop song and it's still country because I'm country. And there's a lot of truth to that. And I know Rock, I know you had some songs that, one of them that off the top of my head was the song I believe the Oak Ridge Boys recorded called "We Loved Each Other Every Now and Then." And that was, am I right? They recorded that. But that song was not, it didn't have the steel guitars in it. It was more pop oriented, but it was just a damn beautiful song.
Still is.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Let me tell you, I want to say something about the record industry and the recording radio industry. We're talking about shiny objects here, boys. We have allowed over the past 30 years or more, because of the pressure of society, to allow our children to be raised by other people in kindergartens and whatever it is that they put them where they go to work. And the way you keep a child's attention is with a shiny object. That's the way that your radio music is today. These people that are big stars today will never be heard of again. It ain't like us remembering George Jones and a lifter for sale.
Right. Yeah, and I want to shift gears on that because you kind of touched on it there, Rock. You reminded me of something. Mutt and I were talking on the phone, I don't know, a month or so ago, and he was telling me that he had gone out and he was telling me about the Killough and Eckley album, and which I didn't even know existed. I never heard it. By the way, I recommended a friend of mine.
Neither does anybody else, Carl.
But, hey, I reckon when as I said, it was a month or so ago, probably 6 months ago we were talking, but I recommended that. I was telling a friend of mine about it, who's a SCV member from California. He's in the there it is, right there. He's moved to Tennessee since, and he went out and found that album online and bought it. And we were talking about it. He said, "Man," he said, "that
good God, man, it's worth a fortune."
He said that album is over the top. He's like, "Man, the music on there is so great." And I said, "I bet you didn't know where to classify it though, because rock has blues, soul, country, bluegrass, everything all mixed together, and it's just music." And I, you know, I had a question in there somewhere, and I think I lost my. Oh, I remember what it was. When Mutt was telling me about this album.
Are you stoned, Carl?
Not that no, but I haven't eaten since 9 o'clock this morning, so that might have something to do with it. When Mutt was telling me about this album, he was telling me that about digging up an interview with you from a small town in Texas when you and I think, Dan Eckley were out promoting this album. And Mutt, I'd love for you to tell me what the quote was. This was in 1977, am I right?
Oh my Lord. I wish I'd known you was going to ask me that. Did you, hey, do you want to do that commercial? And then I'll see if I can get it real quick.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and do a commercial real quick. Before we do our commercial, please remember our sponsors. They're scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Victory Flags and More, and of course the Confederate Legion. Both great causes. Victory Flags and More. You can go to www.victoryflagsandmore.com, and remember to go change the narrative by going to MakeDixieGreatAgain.org.
There is a place nestled in the rolling farmland of southern Middle Tennessee. A home constructed in 1837, nearly lost to the ravages of war. Saved by a servant and a Confederate general. A place where families loved and lost. If walls could talk, what stories could be told? If a place, a home, can feel love, loss, pain, surely this is one of those places. Nearby is a more recent structure, and inside are the stories of heroes and heroines, stories of battles won and lost. Stories of sacrifices made by the people of its native soil. A place that will tell the true and complete story of the Southland and the war fought for its freedom. From the causes that led to the conflict to the modern-day struggles to protect Southern history. Historic Elm Springs and the Confederate Museum at Elm Springs are the general headquarters for the Sons of Confederate Veterans. A place where the story of the Southland and its historic struggle is preserved and told. Come and discover your history.
We seem to be a man down. I'm going to be working on that. While I am, I'll, of course, let the legend himself, Carl, get back to his lovely questions. I hated to cut him off, but, Connor requires me to do a commercial, and for once I didn't play his. So, every chance in a blue moon, am I right? But I'll be trying to get a rock back on, and I'll let y'all take it over.
All right. So right before we left, you said you were trying to get that quote about what a gentleman in Texas wrote about Rock's music. And since you put me on the spot, I can't find it.
Well, the quote I was interested in, the specific one was, this was, I think, 1977, and Rock had a quote in that article about the South in general.
Yes. That I know exactly which quote you're talking about. And basically it was kind of like what we had touched on earlier, where it said that, the being Southern is not just where you live. It is something that you feel is from the earth, and it's just who we are. And I would, but I can't, like I said, I can't.
If I remember the quote, the thing that struck me, and I've told other people this quote, and friends of mine in the SCV, and it was something to the effect of that the South is the last bastion of real America.
Yes, there you go.
And
that was it.
And that is so timely. But this was over 40 years ago, and Rock and presumably others saw this coming. But it's even truer today than it was then. I think the interesting thing is, I believe from my studies on early America and on the Southern founders and them, I think that it's always been true. I think that that when you take the Southern influence out of America, you no longer have an America. We had a guest on the show. I say they had a guest on the show who's a good friend of mine, Tommy Daniel, down in Auburn, and he did a talk on here about Southern music being, American music being Southern music. And there's a lot. There's a ton of truth to that. I mean, when you go from jazz to zydeco to bluegrass to country music, Southern rock, rock and roll, blues, gospel, all of it has its roots in Southern music. But when you go back even beyond that, our views on liberty and all, it's all Southern. And I think all of that, I think the Southern spirit in general, just our view, I tell everybody, I say, if you want to really sum the Southern view of politics up, it's real simple. Stay off my lawn.
Yeah.
Don't infringe on me and my family, and I won't have to kill you. That's the Southern viewpoint. But at the same time, I think that family is very important, and the Southern sense of community is different. And Rock, I know, using that as a segue, I know you grew up, if I'm not mistaken, you were the son of a sharecropping family, if I'm not mistaken. How did that factor into your writing?
No, Carl, it was a little bit different from that. I grew up a long way out of, excuse me. I was born in Greenville, Alabama, but my family, I lived about 15 miles east of town, the community called Honorville. My grandfather was a large landowner, and when he died, the older of his 9 children didn't get a lot. The younger ones received most of the land. But my father started buying land from him at a very reasonable rate early on in his life, and wound up with a big farm, 1,063,000 acres or more. And I grew up out there at the house at the end of the road. There were 3 black families that lived on my father's place. And in the summertime, those were my pals. Those kids were my pals. We went to the fields and worked together. So they were sharecroppers, and I grew up like that, eating at their table and being with their kids and insisting that they call me Arthur, my name being Arthur Lloyd. I wouldn't put up with that Mr. stuff. However, their relationship with my mother and father were different. Excuse me. And over time, I understood it. Give me a break. That's where I got the black influence. I thought the guys take a RC Cola bottle and file it around the top and take it and crack it on a brick and break it off and rub it on the brick where it wouldn't be sharp edged and put it on that finger and play guitar with it. I saw that. That's where I come from. In my house, my mama had the radio on all day long, and it was AM days. In other words, it wasn't a dedicated station. You get up in the morning, there would be nothing but the farm stove and the gospel music. About 9 o'clock, you do something like the Boogie Man. It'd be nothing but the blues. I'm talking about way down in that blues, like the black people listen to. And then it come the farm report and the gospel music and the country music. Hank Williams had a show 15 minutes on WCK on WSFA in Montgomery. Every day at 12 o'clock, I was inside listening to Hank Williams music. He had a 30-minute radio show. I mean, it was all around me. Big orchestra music. It was on all day long, every day of the earth. And then Sunday singing in church. I mean, that was what I was surrounded with when I was growing up. And I got a little charge out of it all, I guess.
Yeah, it was probably a part of life back then. And I wondered, I've heard people say that. And even, when Mutt and I are pretty close to the same age. And I mean, by the time we grew up, the TV was, more mainstream. We didn't have to sit around the radio and that sort of thing. And even then, I mean, I remember my favorite shows growing up. Y'all remember the Porter Wagner show and Hee Haw and all of that. And it was country music was, I think you hit on it right there. To me, I mean, if you listen to Roy Clark, was Roy Clark country? Yeah, he was, but he was also jazz and he was also blues. Listen, I'm just using Hee Haw as an example, but you listen to Buck Owens and his guitar player, Don Rich, playing in the blues scale. No question in my mind, blues had influenced his guitar playing because he's playing in a minor pentatonic scale, which wasn't, that wasn't normal at that time for country music songs. And so I think that the whole thing that ties all of it together, the different influences and everything, is I put it this way, like my buddy Tommy Daniel said, the ingredients that have made American music. Now he was referring to rock and roll, but I think as all American music could not have come from anywhere else on earth but the South. I don't think you would have had the ingredients for it anywhere else because you did not have that mixture of cultures that all came together with their own unique styles and brought about what we call today music in America. But I mean, you got any thoughts on that?
I agree. I'm kind of like what you said. I grew up, my grandmother played piano. She didn't just play gospel music. She played the Alley Cat song, Under the Double Eagle, marches, anything. My mother played piano. My daddy was a bass player. Brother played guitar. So there's always music around the house, always something. But I think it's just that huge mixture and influence of whatever. It's just kind of like when you're learning, like my style resembles a lot of rock stuff, but it got a whole bunch of different pieces. I think people down here pick what they like and put it in their music and kind of mix it up in there. And I think all those influences have blossomed out into what, like you said, is now modern day rock and roll, or back then when all the different music started coming out. Even some of the old hillbilly music, like not even bluegrass music, but hillbilly music. Some of it, once it came down the hill and they put electricity to it, it sounded different, and I started doing things with it. That man sitting right there will take a straight laced song and wind it up quicker than anybody I've ever seen. And if you don't believe that, I can tell you, there's a gentleman, Rock, what's the guy we talked about last night?
John D. Loudermilk.
Yes. If you don't believe it, listen to John D. Loudermilk's original version of Bad News. And that song's been done by umpteen people. However, look on YouTube under the Blazing Tracks album that Rock had, and look up Bad News and listen to the difference in them. And that's what I'm talking about when you take those influences and you put them on one of those country songs, and you fixed it up. Put a little jelly on that peanut butter. Make it more better.
Yeah, and so much of
Carl.
yeah,
was
go
about
ahead, Rock.
The black people and the white people of the South all come from the same place. The black people so-called invented the blues, okay, because that's the characteristic that we think of. When you say the blues, you think of B.B. King, Muddy Waters, on and on. But the blues is pervasive. It's in the dirt.
Amen.
Country music ain't nothing but white man's version of the blues. The black folks right there is in a major form of the phrase of the key, and the white folks right there is in the major phrase of the key, and it's the same thing. I had a black guy worked in a sawmill with me one time. His name was Johnny Hayes because he was deformed, but he could shovel lumber, boy, and he had a slur when he talked, and he said, one day to me one day, I said, "How you doing, Johnny?" He said, "I get up to this. I go to bed with one thing on my mind every night. One thing every night." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, I get up this morning. It's the same damn thing." That's what I'm talking about. It's in the dirt. We come from the same place. We're singing about the same things, just in different forms that we can understand.
Yeah, I know, Rock. You and I were talking one time, and I don't remember which one of us said it, but we both agreed. Who could say that Huddy Ledbetter wasn't country and Hank Williams wasn't a blues player?
No. It's all the same.
It is. It's just a different interpretation of the same thing. And I mean, I think you said it beautifully right there. You take the dirt out of it, you take the Southern influence out of it, and it doesn't exist.
All you got then is Yankees.
Mutt, you wrote a song that I'm a big fan of called "Confederate Soldier," and I mentioned it in my opening remarks, and it brought a kind of a sense of stability to me. I don't know if y'all know it or not, but sometimes I can be a little hot-headed and a little bit temperamental. But and a little bit opinionated, maybe.
Yeah. Just check.
But when I heard that song, I was sitting there saying, this song it's exactly how I feel, but you went about it in a different way. Had I written that song or something, addressing the same issue, there would have been a lot of anger to me, in my lyrics. And I think that the way you went about it was so much better because it appealed to, I think, a broader base of people. How did you come up with that song? And if you don't mind, I'd like for you to play it for us.
I'll play it. I will tell you.
You want to play it first and then explain it to us, or however you want to do it.
I'll do that. I'll play it for you. Can you hear that?
Can I take a nap?
We'll wake you up when he's done,
The year was 1904. 39 years after the war. The town turned out on the street, along with the ladies of the UDC. Confederate flags and wreaths were placed round and along the marble bays. Soldiers in uniform worn in the war, vanquished but Southern to the core. Leave the Confederate flag and statues along. Flag's not just a piece of cloth, statues ain't just stone. One's a reminder of those who fought and died. The other waves proudly, a symbol of Southern pride. Confederate soldiers standing there, centerpiece of town square. For 100 years he stood unharmed, wrapped in a blanket of Southern charm. Leave the Confederate flag and statues alone. Flag's not just a piece of cloth, statues ain't just stone. One's a reminder of those who fought and died. The other waves proudly, a symbol of Southern pride. There you go.
I love it. I know there are hundreds of people out there clapping right now.
Rock's clapping because I'm done.
Tell me.
Taught that boy everything he knows.
Yeah, he did. I will tell you that song came off of about 4 different sheets of song writings, if you will. It's a menagerie of different ones. I would start out pretty much the first 2 or 3 versions of it sounded like what you said. You know, I don't know if I can say it on here or not, but I'm just going to say it was a little more violent reaction to the fact if you want to touch my Confederate flag. How about that? It was not a not so nice one. It was a little more of how I grew up and kind of in your face kind of thing. And I decided we have a lot of that, and all I've tried to learn getting older is a lot of times when you start out that way, you get met with that and nobody hears what you're saying. And you can't even hear what you're saying because you're trying to yell over the other person and it just gets all jacked up. So I thought if I went about it in the middle of the road from a historical aspect and a fact about just having Southern pride. My first blue tick was named Southern Blue Pride. I mean, so with that being said, trying to come at it from that angle of just being proud to be Southern and don't touch that because it's my heritage. And you know, first time I ever seen a Confederate flag was painted on the top of my daddy's Air Force cap that he wore in the 50s. You know, I wore Confederate flags on the back of my helmet in Desert Storm, my aviation helmet, and nobody said a word. You know, so and if anybody out there wants to doubt that, I got pictures to prove it because I knew one day somebody would question that. But that tried to come from it, like I said, from a historical, middle of the road. If you look at any of the old pictures from the early 1900s when they were dedicating the monuments, and, you know, most people try to tie that into when the Jim Crow laws were and all that stuff. And people obviously can't read a history book and they can't do math because they should realize that most of those monuments went up at the 40, 50 year, you know, there were certain marks when they were going up. It wasn't just in spite of something, if you will. You know, so that's kind of where it came from.
Well, the South had to recover to the point where people could afford to give a handful of pennies towards one of those monuments. I mean,
exactly.
You know,
and they couldn't do it until after the 1900s.
That's right.
In most states and counties and places. I will tell you this real quick on that song, Carl, all the donations or all the money I made off of that song went back to the SCV for the Museum Fund and the Heritage Defense Fund. All those CDs are gone, but there's a place called ConfederateShop.com that bought some of the CDs from me, and he still has a few copies if you want it on CD. But that music is also, you can get it. It's on Pandora. It's on Apple Music. Anywhere you can download digital music, that Confederate Soldiers on there. And if you go to Pandora and search, it's actually on there as well.
It's a great song. It's one of my favorites, and you know, and I love the recording you did of it. It was reverent. You know how I am, man. When I write a song, recorded, it's gonna have electric guitars and pianos and drums and all that behind it. And I thought the way you recorded it was spot on. It was perfect.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Harrison, how close are we on time there, brother?
I mean, you guys can go for a bit longer if you want. We're at about an hour.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask, let me bring this up. If y'all have noticed over the weeks and months that they've been doing the SCV chat, they close out with rare frop on about every show. And because I told that story, people think it's my story. It is not my story. I got that story from Rock Killough. And show us your hat, Rock. Rare frop. That is a Rock Killough story. He is the origin of that. The SCV chat has co-opted it from me, or from Rock through me, basically. And Rock, I'd love to hear the story behind that. I've heard it, but I think everybody else out there would love to hear it too, because it's a great story of growing up in the South. It's just when you told me, when I heard that, I think actually Mutt told me a story when I heard it. I was like, man, that reminds me of 100 things that happened to me when I was a kid. So can you hit us with the story?
Okay, I'll try to cut it short. You understand this happened in about 1964, maybe? And we're talking about Southern vernacular here, Black Southern vernacular, when I give you this speech. Okay, what happened was me and a friend of mine decided to walk across the street from Ampex Corporation, where I worked when I was a student at Auburn to help pay my way, to get us some sardines and crackers one day, because we got tired of playing hearts at the office during the break. So we did, and we got over there, and it's one of those kind of places on a Y service station, kind of convenience deal, and all the people that drove trucks was in there filling up and getting them something to eat and all that, you know. And so me and John went on in there and got out, and we were standing under the portico looking at everything, all this activity going on. And we noticed over by the diesel pumps an overloaded pulpwood truck. Now, if you're from the deep South, you understand what I mean visually when I say an overloaded pulpwood truck. It's one of them tandem short loaders stacked about 20 feet high with pulpwood, such that if the wind blew, you'd think it would just blow it over, you know. So we're standing there saying, man, you know, I don't want to be standing there by that truck like that guy pumping diesel. So we both looked pretty closely, and there was a flat tire on the inside of one of the tandem wheels. John said, I believe he's got a flat tire. And I looked, and he did. And John hollered to the fella. See, he said, hey, fella, you got a flat tire there. And it was a black guy pumping fuel. And he was about 38, maybe 40 years old. One of the strongest guys. He looked like Bull of the Woods. Kind of a guy had muscles on his muscles, you know. He'd been in the woods all of his life. His skin was stained with pine resin. He didn't have on a shirt, broke-down shoes with no visible socks, overalls with one gallus hook, with Bill flopping down, standing there by that truck pumping diesel fuel. So after John yelled to him, he looked up and he said, "Yes, sir. I told my boss man here was fropping." He said, "Rough rock."
I never get tired of hearing that.
You will not hear that story.
What could I say? Rough,
You won't hear that.
rough frop.
You won't hear that dialect anywhere north of the Mason-Dixon line. You know, and that's the funny thing is us Southerners, when you say rare frop, us Southerners, we know what the hell you're saying.
Yeah.
You know,
you
you
can
said
read
that
it in
to
a
York,
Georgia.
They think you were Russian or something, you know.
Well, but you understand that what the man said, and I'll interpret it for your listeners. He said, "Yes, sir. I told my boss man it was flopping," which was their way of saying it was flat tire. And my boss man said, "Well, let her flop. Get that load to the damn pulpwood yard, boy."
I knew a guy over in
Well, what can I say?
I knew a guy up in Western Tennessee one time I used to fish with. He had a buddy, good friend of his that kind of had a real thick backwoods Southern accent, and he was actually from Arkansas, and he said he was telling my buddy, he said, "Yeah, I was out this morning seeding them squirrels." And he said, you were doing what? He said, "I was seeding the squirrels." He said, "This guy walked around." He said, "I walked around for about a week trying to figure out what in the hell he was doing to the squirrels." Finally figured out he was feeding the squirrels, not feeding the squirrels. You get some different. People talk about the Southern accent, you know, when you talk about riffraff or seeding the squirrels. People think there's one Southern dialect. No, there's about probably a dozen or more of them, you know. There ain't just one Southern dialect. So
I tell you
tell
where
me
it
about
is.
that hat you
It's
got
Shelby
on your
Foot.
head there, Rock. Can the viewers? That's become a sale
Well,
of SCV chat. So where can the viewers get themselves one of those?
You can get one of these, and what it means is, don't worry about it. Let the ruffian drag, you know. If your troubles get you down, just let her frog. So
Rare frog.
you can get one of
Rare
these,
frog.
or you can get a T-shirt at my at my Facebook site. All you have to do is charge in and say, "I want one," and you get. I'm sorry, boy. I don't talk much.
Well, let me say it this way. Mutt can probably tell us better. That's another thing I wanted to bring up was the reason Rock's voice is shot on him is he spent several days doing an audio book that he's written about some of his tales from the road. I don't know if I told y'all this coming in, but he toured with as part of Hank Cochran's band for 2 or 3 years, and they were the opening act for Willie Nelson, and so he's got a book out with tales from the road. He's got some stories in there. He sent me a couple of them, just his observations of life on his property and in the South, and just musings set the music with him talking, and he had to go into the studio and record all of these. And so he's got a touch of bronchitis, and that's why he's coughing so much tonight. So, Mutt, would you like to tell us where if you know where we can get his book and his hat, and where people, if they want to hear more of his music, where can they go?
One of the places you can look at is Rock Killough's Front Porch series. That's where a lot of the music is. You can also
on Facebook.
Yes, on Facebook. Yeah. And if you go to Rock Killough, there's two to three different websites for Rock Killough, or 2 or 3 Facebook pages. There's Rock Killough's music, and his Front Porch series. Go ahead, Rock.
The Baleful Eyes where the stories are. And if you want the music, you can look on YouTube under Rock Killough Music. There's a bunch of stuff there.
And for those that can't find in the chat, I did pin their Facebook pages in the chat. SCV Chat will have them posted on their Facebook page, so you can support these guys, give them a follow, and stay in touch with whatever they do in the future. And with that, I would like to remind everybody that our book review for next Monday's show is The Problem with Lincoln. It should be a good one.
Is that an open question?
Yes, you can challenge me if you want to. You can probably bully me into changing it.
I can't say what I want to.
We'll be off air in a second if you can. But The Problem with Lincoln, and also remember about Look Around the Confederation this Thursday at 7 p.m. If you have a story from your division or camp, please email scvyouth.outreach@gmail.com. And on this week, we have a special guest coming on from a camp in Virginia. Their name slips me right now. I'm sorry. But they're trying to put a new Lee monument up in Virginia. And it's a project that's going to be real daunting. And we're going to give them some time to talk about it and what they need us to do. And, of course, what they are planning to do with getting General Lee back up in Virginia.
Could I say one thing real quick?
I
just want to say real quick that I'm a member of the Henry L. Benning Camp, 517 out of Columbus, Georgia. And I'm also a member of the Mechanized Cavalry, Sons of Confederate Veterans. And I'm real proud of those two things. And it's been an honor for me, for Mr. Carl to have me putting me in touch with the people that I needed to get in touch with in order to get that song out and to be able to perform it, people. And I really appreciate that. And thank y'all for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, let me say, I kind of messed up there, Mutt, because, Alabama had a little bit of we kind of had a monopoly on Mutt and his talents. And then I screwed up and started letting other divisions know. And he called me back in about the middle of June last year. Well, no, about the middle of May last year, right before the Alabama division reunion. Said, "Hey, what's the date of y'all's reunion?" I told him. He said, "Yeah, Miss Sally told me, Mutt, I think you messed up." He said, "I think you scheduled 2 gigs on the same night." And as it turned out, no, one was on Friday, one was on Saturday, but he was kind enough to come over and play ours anyway. But,
y'all treated me very, I've been treated real good by the Alabama camps.
The funny thing was, the commander of the Georgia division came up to one of our guys and said, "How is it
the young guy's name?
Alabama gets more performances out of this member of the Georgia division than we do?" I was like, "Because we know about him."
Y'all feed me.
As a
I'm
common
happy
sense,
to help
anyway.
and I hope that this helps. And Mutt, why don't you tell us where they can get your music and where everybody out there listening, because I think a lot of them going to be interested and look, and I want to tell everybody out there listening, we talked about 2 or 3 of Mutt's songs. There's a bunch of them out there. I watch and listen to every one of them. I usually watch and listen to them multiple times. I've had the pleasure of getting to sit down in the hotel lobby in Prattville, Alabama, and pick the guitar with Mutt a little bit too. And so if y'all want to hear more of his music, Mutt, why don't you tell us where they can get in contact with you?
You can get in touch with me on Facebook at Mutt Cooper's Decked Out. You can also contact me at muttcooper.com. Some of the CDs are on there. You can look me up on YouTube. There, and like I said, it's all my music is available for download on digital platforms. And I would highly encourage everyone who wants to hear some really good country music with some Southern influences, just not just straightforward whatever, but really good down home music with blues and all mixed in. Please look up Rock Killough and some of his albums and stuff that he's done over the years. If you don't know who Rock is, you need to look him up. I would highly encourage you.
Well, Rock has been a humongous influence on both of us, and I gotta tell this too. Rock was also a source of frustration for me. Now, he don't know what I'm about to say, but I'm gonna tell you. And Mutt knows this.
Watch out now.
One of my favorite albums, or one of my top 3 favorite albums of all time. I'll tell you what they were. It was Whiskey Bent and Hellbound by Hank Jr., Habits Old and New by Hank Jr., and San Antonio Rose by Willie Nelson and Ray Price. Those are probably the 3 albums that I will go back to time and time again until the day I'm dead and gone from this earth, okay? All right, so on Whiskey Bent and Hellbound, there's a song called Come and Go Blues. It was written by Greg Allman. And Rock, as I later found out, taught Hank Jr. how to play that song. And I spent over 20 years trying to figure out how to play this song. And I thought, whoever in the hell is playing this acoustic guitar is from outer space, because none of this work. I know it's in G, but I still can't play it. Well, because I'd spent 20 years not knowing there was such a thing called open tuning. And now I do know. I'm 40.
You are
right,
right,
40 years now, and I know that open tuning exists. I still can't do it. But Rock was the one that taught Hank Jr. how to play that song in open G. And open G and what do we call it, Rock? The concert tuning and modal tuning. He told me this on the phone. I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but concert and modal are 2 different types of tuning, totally different. I'll sit there and try for hours to play that freaking song, and it was all Rock Killough's fault because he taught Hank how to play it in open tuning. And I believe, now correct me if I'm wrong, but Hank actually used Rock Killough's guitar when he recorded that. Is that correct?
Yes, he did, because I had the only guitar I know. I carried 2 guitars with me years ago. I carried one in concert tuning and one in open G, which is my favorite key to play in. Wrote a lot of my songs in open G, and I had an open G guitar there. He had come in, and it was right out of the blue to the studio band. We had kind of an itinerary a little bit, and he said, I want to play this song by Greg Allman. And he said, anybody know how to play it? And I looked around. He's country boys, you know. I held up my hand. I said, well, I do. And he said, show me how, Hoss. So I took my G guitar out and showed him. He said, what the hell is that? I said, well, this is how he did it, and this is how you're going to do it if you're going to do it like he did it. And so I showed him how, and it was amazing. He was really quick. He was really smart. He picked it up instantly and went through it a couple of times sitting in the control room and went inside. And you won't believe this. He went in there and he recorded that guitar without singing. So I'm presuming, as we all do sometimes, sang the lyric to himself. And then he went back and listened to it in the control room, and went back inside the vocal booth, and they put that guitar track in, and he sang it one time. And Carl, it's all out of time. If you listen to it, that song at the end of it ain't got nowhere near what 1, 2, 3, 4 is. And he hooked it. He's a genius.
I don't think it could have been done any better, though. I mean, it's one of those. And again, you got a great example of country and blues coming together in that song. And I think his vocals and the playing and the chord progression, and had it been done in anything other than an open chord, I don't think it would have worked. So it was like you had all of these
that's where
these
Greg
things
wrote it,
coming
Carl.
together.
He wrote it in open G. Open G is the same tuning that dobro players use, slide players, in the country music field. Most of the time in the blues field, they use open E. Gives you an extra string at the bottom, don't you see?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. Well, Moose, are we done? We got more time? I mean,
I think it's about time to hit the rare frog.
rare frog.
Right.
Well, let me say this, man. It's been a great honor. I was really honored to be asked to host the SCV chat. I ain't never seen myself as a host of anything other than maybe a barn dance, but it was a real honor to be on here, and it was a greater honor to have these two guys with me, man. Rock Killough is absolutely one of my heroes. I love these two guys to death. I think the world of both of them. Rock has done more for me in a musical sense than he will ever know. And Mutt is I met Mutt through Rock, actually. It's kind of funny. And Mutt's he's one of my really good friends. I just think the world of both of them. And I'm very appreciative of both of y'all coming on, and I just cannot say enough about how excited I was to do this, knowing that the two of y'all were going to be guests, and I'm a great fan of both of your music as well.
Well, can I just say real quick that I'm a huge fan of yours, Carl, for all the stuff. I see a lot of the rhetoric and the basically BS that gets put out on social media. And I see you going at it from a historically and an educated point, making valid points on the things that you do and you talk about. And every time I read one of your dissertations, when you put someone in their place, generally, of course, but factually, the only thing I can hear is Brother Dave Gardner in my ear going, "You is suddenly smart. You is suddenly smart." And I love it when you do what you do, sir, and I appreciate what you do for the SCV. And thank you for doing what you do to protect what we have.
Thank you, Mutt. I appreciate that, brother.
Amen, Carl. Run for senator, Carl.
Now, I've been asked that before. People ask me before. You ever?
I'll campaign for you.
People ask me before, have you ever thought about running for political office?
Right.
I said, I wouldn't last. I said, somebody would question my integrity. I would challenge them to a duel, and I would win, and I'd be in jail.
But your campaign slogan could be "Rare Frog."
Yes, it has to be. It's required.
Yeah.
But
I want to guys. Hey, I appreciate y'all more than you know. Thank y'all so much, and we need to do this again. I hope everybody out there listening enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to y'all off the air sometime real soon too.
All right. Well, thank you, young man, for doing a good job keeping us all straight. We appreciate it.
Oh, no. Thank y'all for coming on. I'll thank Carl for hosting, because if he didn't host, I would have to hear Connor talk about how bad I suck at hosting. And I'm also having midterms this week, so Carl came in and really saved the day and was able to take this off my plate, knowing that I had a good person that would give us a great episode, and I wouldn't have to worry about much. All I could do is sit back and be a fan of the chat and hear you great men talk about music and a lot of music that I listen to. I'm not like most kids my age. I listen to old country music. So, it was an honor to hear all y'all talk about it. And, of course, have y'all on the show, and we hope to have you back one day.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
And with that, we will end the show like we always do by telling you, please remember to do not fumar in the elevator and wear a frock.
Rough,
You got